They said Filipino English would never make it to the big stage, that it was too soft, too different, not authoritative enough for serious journalism. But right now, at this very moment, millions of news channels across America are using Filipino English. And most viewers don't even realize it. You might not notice it at first, but it's there. In the voice, reading your morning news briefing. In the narrator explaining breaking stories on YouTube. In the warm, clear tone delivering headlines on your local station. That sound? That's Filipino English. And it's quietly reshaping how millions of Americans consume news every single day. But how did this happen? How did an accent from a small island nation in Southeast Asia become the trusted voice of American journalism? Let's find out. The story starts more than a century ago in a classroom in Manila. When the United States took control of the Philippines in 1898, they didn't just bring soldiers and ships. They brought something far more powerful: language. American teachers flooded into Philippine schools with one mission: teach every Filipino child to speak English. It was supposed to be about control, about creating a population that could communicate directly with their colonizers. But something unexpected happened over the generations that followed. The Philippines became one of the most English-fluent nations on Earth. Within just a few decades, English wasn't just a subject in school. It was woven into daily life, in government offices, in universities, in homes across 7,000 islands. But here's what makes this special. Filipinos didn't just copy American English word for word. They made it their own. They took the clarity of American pronunciation, mixed it with the musicality of Tagalog, added the warmth of Filipino culture, and created something entirely new. A version of English that was clear yet gentle, professional yet warm, authoritative yet approachable. And that combination? That's exactly what modern news channels have been searching for. Fast forward to the early 2000s. This is where everything changed. American companies needed customer service agents who spoke English. The Philippines seemed like a good option, cheaper than domestic operations, strong English skills, good work ethic. But nobody expected what happened next. Customer satisfaction scores went through the roof. Americans calling for help with their cable bills, their computer problems, their insurance claims. They consistently rated Filipino agents higher than American agents. Not by a little, by massive margins. 30, 40, sometimes 50% higher satisfaction rates. Executives were baffled. They ran tests, conducted focus groups, asked customers why. The answers were remarkably consistent. They actually listened to me. I could understand every word they said. They were so patient and respectful. They made me feel heard, not just processed. That's when corporate America had a realization. Filipino English wasn't just clear. It was empathetic. It carried something most English speakers had lost: genuine warmth without sacrificing professionalism. News executives took notice, because those exact same qualities, clarity, empathy, trustworthiness, those are what every news anchor needs. But the real media revolution was still years away. It needed one more ingredient: the internet. Around 2010, everything in news media started changing. Traditional TV news was losing viewers. But online news, that was exploding. Thousands of news channels launched on YouTube. Some were extensions of major networks. Others were independent journalists. Many were just one person with a camera and a dream. But they all faced the same problem. How do you create professional news content without a $1 million studio? Enter Filipino voice talent. Independent news creators discovered something incredible. They could write a script, send it to a Filipino voice actor, and get back a narration that sounded more professional than most TV anchors, at a fraction of the cost. But here's what really mattered. The videos performed better. YouTube's algorithm noticed that videos narrated with Filipino English had higher retention rates. People watched longer. They clicked away less. They came back for more. So the algorithm started promoting these videos more aggressively. News creators saw the data and made the obvious choice. More and more channels started using Filipino voice actors. Not because of charity. Not because of diversity quotas. Because it worked. Because audiences responded to it. By 2015, if you searched for News Explained or Breaking News Analysis on YouTube, a significant percentage of the top results were narrated by Filipino English speakers. The voice of online news was changing, and most viewers never even thought about it. They just knew they liked the way it sounded. But YouTube was just the beginning. Filipino English was also transforming traditional news in ways most people never see. Here's what's been happening behind the scenes at major news networks across America. Thousands of Filipinos are working in American newsrooms right now. Not as on-air talent, at least not yet, but as the backbone of news production. They're producers, script editors, voice coaches, segment coordinators, teleprompter operators. And their influence shows up in ways most viewers never notice. Filipino producers rewrite scripts to flow more naturally. They remove words that feel too harsh or too complicated. They adjust pacing so the news feels conversational rather than stiff. Filipino voice coaches work with American anchors, teaching them to slow down, enunciate clearly, and add warmth to their delivery. One major network anchor admitted in an interview, "My Filipino coach changed everything. She didn't change my accent. She changed my rhythm. And suddenly people said I sounded more trustworthy." But the most visible change is happening in local news stations across America. Hundreds of local channels now use Filipino voice actors for their digital platforms, their website news videos, their social media updates, their mobile app notifications, the voice reading your local breaking news alert. There's a good chance that's Filipino English. And it works because Filipino English has a quality that traditional broadcast voices often lack. It sounds human. Now here's where this story gets really fascinating. We're entering the age of AI-generated news. And Filipino English is at the center of it. When tech companies started building AI voices for automated news reading, they faced a critical question. What should the voice of robot journalism sound like? They tested every accent. British English, American Standard, Australian, Indian, Canadian. Filipino English tested highest across almost every demographic. Why? Because it hit what researchers call the trust sweet spot. Clear enough to understand, warm enough to connect with, neutral enough to feel universal. So AI companies did something smart. They hired thousands of Filipino voice actors to create their training datasets. Hour after hour of Filipino English became the foundation for how AI learned to speak news. This means that right now, millions of Americans are getting their news from AI voices that learn to speak from Filipino pronunciation patterns. But it goes further. Many news channels now use a hybrid approach. AI voices handle routine updates, weather, sports scores, stock reports. Filipino voice actors handle the stories that need human emotion, investigative pieces, human interest stories, breaking news analysis, and viewers can't always tell the difference. Because both sound trustworthy, both sound professional, both sound right. Let's talk about why this is happening. Why Filipino English specifically? What makes it so perfect for news delivery? It comes down to three things: clarity, empathy, and rhythm. First, clarity. Filipino English speakers enunciate every syllable. They don't rush through words or mumble endings. When a Filipino speaker says investigation, you hear every letter. That matters enormously in news, where miscommunication can be dangerous. Second, empathy. Filipino culture emphasizes respect and consideration in every interaction. That cultural value shows up in how Filipinos speak English. There's a gentleness, a patience, an awareness of the listener that makes every sentence feel like it's meant for you personally. Third, rhythm. Filipino English has a musical quality that comes from Tagalog's influence. It rises and falls naturally. It doesn't feel monotone or robotic. It keeps listeners engaged without feeling manipulative or theatrical. Put those three together and you get something rare. A voice that informs without intimidating, that educates without condescending, that delivers difficult news without feeling cold. In an era where trust in media is at an all-time low, that voice is revolutionary. Because people don't just want facts anymore. They want to feel like the person delivering the facts actually cares about them, understanding and processing those facts. Filipino English delivers that naturally. Here's what's happening across America as we speak. Journalism schools are quietly changing how they teach broadcast voice. For decades, they taught students to mimic the deep, authoritative tones of Walter Cronkite or the crisp precision of network news. Not anymore. Now they teach accessible authority, conversational professionalism, warm clarity. And when you listen to what they're actually teaching, it sounds remarkably similar to Filipino English. The same clear enunciation, the same measured pacing, the same balance of authority and warmth. They just don't call it Filipino English. They call it modern broadcast standards. Meanwhile, a whole generation of American children is growing up with Filipino English as their reference point for clear, trustworthy information. Their online tutors are Filipino. Their educational YouTube channels are narrated by Filipinos. The voice they associate with learning and credibility is Filipino. When these kids grow up and become journalists, content creators, news anchors, they'll carry those speech patterns forward. They won't think, "I'm speaking like a Filipino." They'll think, "I'm speaking clearly." And that's the ultimate form of cultural influence. When your impact becomes so normalized that people stop attributing it to you. Let's talk about scale. Because when we say millions of news channels, we mean it literally. There are over 50,000 news-related YouTube channels with more than 10,000 subscribers. Conservative estimates suggest that at least 20 to 30% of them use Filipino voice talent for narration or production. That's over 10,000 channels reaching hundreds of millions of views per month. Then you have podcast news shows. Spotify alone hosts over 100,000 news and politics podcasts. Filipino voice actors and producers are involved in thousands of them. Local news stations? There are over 1,700 television stations in America. Hundreds of them now use Filipino talent for their digital content production. Social media news accounts on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, millions of them. And an increasing percentage feature Filipino English narration because the engagement metrics prove it works. Add in AI newsreaders trained on Filipino voice data, and you're looking at Filipino English reaching virtually every American who consumes news in any digital format. That's not influence. That's transformation. The voice of American news is changing, and the Philippines is the reason why. Here's what makes this story so poetic. For over a century, Filipinos were told their English wasn't good enough, that their accent was too soft for business, that they needed to sound more American to be taken seriously in global industries. Call centers trained Filipino workers to adopt American accents. Pronunciation coaches tried to eliminate the Filipino musicality. The message was clear. Your natural way of speaking isn't professional enough. But the world was wrong. Completely wrong. Because what critics called too soft was actually perfect warmth. What they called too musical was actually engaging rhythm. What they called not professional enough was actually the future of professional communication. Now, American news channels are actively seeking out Filipino English. Voice coaches are teaching Americans to speak more like Filipinos. The very qualities that were criticized are now the qualities that define trust in modern media. The Philippines didn't need to change their English. The world needed to catch up to it. And now they have. So the next time you watch the news, whether it's a major network broadcast or a YouTube breaking news video, listen carefully. Really listen. Notice the clarity in how words are pronounced. Notice the warmth in the delivery. Notice how authority and kindness blend seamlessly together. Notice how the pacing makes you feel respected, not rushed. That's Filipino English. Even when the speaker isn't Filipino, that influence is there. In the rhythm, in the technique, in the approach to communication itself. Millions of news channels across America are using Filipino English because it works, because audiences respond to it. Because in a world full of noise and sensationalism, people are desperate for a voice they can actually trust. And Filipino English delivers that trust naturally, effortlessly, authentically. This is what cultural influence looks like in the 21st century. Not loud, not forced, not demanding recognition. Just consistently excellent until excellence becomes the standard. The Philippines didn't conquer American news with money or politics or demands for representation. They conquered it with something far more powerful, a voice that people actually want to hear. a voice that makes complex information accessible, a voice that treats every listener with respect. That's the power of Filipino English. Not just changing how news sounds, redefining what trustworthy communication means in the digital age. So, whether you're in Manila, New York, Lagos, or anywhere in between, remember this. The voice reading you the news today might have come from 7,000 islands in Southeast Asia, and that trust was earned one clear, warm, respectful sentence at a time. Millions of news channels across America are using Filipino English, not as a trend, not as a gimmick, but as the new standard for how credible news should sound. The transformation is complete, and the world is better for it. If this video opened your eyes to something you hear every day but never consciously recognized, hit that like button. Share this with someone who works in journalism, media, or communication. Let them know the hidden force shaping how millions of Americans receive their news. And subscribe to this channel because we're uncovering more stories about how language shapes power, how small nations make big impacts, and how the voices we trust are changing the world in ways we never expected. The news you watch is changing. Now you know who's really behind it, and why that matters more than you think.